Hello there. This is Anthony with the Dragons of Victory. I just wanted to comment on recent news in the world of traditional Catholicism that is dominating all of their attention, and that is the news of Archbishop Vigano. And I called him a cardinal a couple videos back. My mistake. He's an archbishop. And well, I guess technically he's nothing. He holds no official title in the Catholic Church anymore because he is not a Catholic. Because he was excommunicated officially. Um, he got sort of known in traditional Catholicism by coming out against Pope Francis, and of course that's automatically a plus in their world. Everything now in their discussion dialogue is just centered around how bad Francis is and the degrees as to how bad he is and whether or not he's even the Pope or not. And he came on the scene accusing Francis of covering up child sex abuse involving a specific cardinal, and then he later, without any evidence, accused Francis of actually committing those acts himself more recently. And this is, a theme I've talked about before. I don't want to be too repetitive here, although it seems like I'll have to be pretty repetitive because topics I've addressed so many times before on previous videos, people just comment as if I never did. Obviously, you know, watch, get a good sense of everything I've said and every position I've taken here, guys, before you comment, okay? Because I'm not going to take you serious. I don't. It's not that I don't take comments seriously, but I'll either I'll either poke fun at you or just delete you altogether if you are not clearly not intending to come at this in any constructive way possible. But I've said that before in the world of trad Catholicism, their heroes always crash and burn because what makes you a hero in the trad Catholic world is taking a they don't really value gentleness or having a gentle kind of charism or approach is not something that they really appreciate because they have specific political goals uh, involving the Catholic Church. They want a change, a radical change in the structure of the Catholic Church at the moment, and that requires a specific political action. And so they like it when you get aggressive. They like you. There was a organization that just crashed and burned, Church Militant. They repeat that phrase, Church Militant, all the time. They use many of them will use the Deus Vult uh, logo, which was the motto of the Crusaders. And they'll often, glorify or make excuses for the Crusades and the Inquisition and all the horrific human rights abuses that took place then, just objectively so, historically speaking. But they always crash and burn because they fly too close to the sun like Icarus. You can't be like that all the time. You can't if your entire persona, if your is all about push towards something, and you that's humans are lovers and fighters. They should be lovers first and foremost. And we should be fighters when necessary. We shouldn't be fighters. That shouldn't be it. How in any way is it? Can you argue that it's good to to be a fighter and to define yourself that way because we should fight to defend ourselves and defend those we love, but we should always strive and build for a world where that never has to happen. But whatever, they go too far. These trad cats heroes, like they're saying he's clearly gone too far because he got more and more aggressive against Francis, and that was rewarded by all the he was emboldened by all the commentary and all the tradcasts, reading every letter he wrote word for word and and treating every single thing he sent out like it had come down, like it was Moses bringing a tablet. It just goes to the point. of how, you know, because traditional Catholicism lacks true connection to to the to the visible church. And of course, some are recognized, but the whole point of being a traditional Catholic is that you think it was ultimately Vatican II was a mistake. You wouldn't be a trad Catholic if you didn't think that. And so you think that the best thing to do for, for it to be undone, but you have to constantly walk this pretty ridiculous tightrope. And yeah, so many of these, I call it a ridiculous tightrope because if you're taking it if you're taking this whole operation and this whole belief set from how they take it and how the certainty you get in Catholicism comes from the connection to Jesus and how we can trace the lineage of the popes all the way back to Peter who was right there with Jesus and so therefore whatever whatever issues we have or whatever conflict or whatever problems there are with the people involved we can always have a sense of uh, s- safety, they say in the Catholic Church, because no matter what doubts we have, we can always go back to it was founded by Jesus, because Peter was right there, and upon this rock I will build my church. Um, Notwithstanding, of course, the fact that Paul, who never met Jesus, contributed significant amounts of the Catholic Church's spiritual ethic into it. And they say, they keep repeat. There's quotes they repeat all the time. There's phrases they repeat all the time. Thought stopping cliches that they use all the time. And one of them is a quote of Jesus: "The gates of hell will not prevail against my church." Well, you know, in the when you get down into the discussion they have of like, is Francis really the Pope? Is he an anti-Pope? Some of them will say, well, we have had anti-popes in the church's history, which is true. There was a Pope, and then a Pope after him declared him to retroactively to be an anti-Pope. Hold it right there. We have had anti-popes previously. That in, how isn't that the gates of hell prevailing against the church? Yeah, it was addressed by a previous pope, but what about the people who had to live under that pope, who were inadvertently not Catholics when they thought they were? And they traditional Catholics really, really are not sympathetic in any way, shape, or form to your intentions at the time, because you can be a basically good person, but if you're not a Catholic, according to them, extra ecclesia nihil salus, you'll go to hell, even if the for no other reason than that you weren't uh, a member of the Catholic Church. It is very, very the deeper you get, the more rigid that gets, and like everyone except for us is damned on this planet. And so there, the reason traditional Catholicism is nonsensical, contradictory, is their entire um, again what they ground themselves in, um, how they could reassure themselves that they're doing the right thing and whatever confusions they have or questions they might have will all be explained later. Is that connection of Christ Church? I founded this church upon this rock, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Well, then but then you have to keep sort of changing the definition of, you bring out these things that have happened, and they say, okay, well, they split hairs and split hairs and split hairs, and the people like it, it, I think absolutely directness, the precise language, cutting through the bullshit is very necessary and appropriate when appropriate. But when you're on a framework that is that when you really get down to it, the only answers to your questions are either this vague sort of like reassurance that, oh, I just trust Jesus because he started the church, ignoring every action these people take. You just trust God, so you trust Jesus, so you trust the church, and this sort of and what for traditional Catholics reinforces and validates that trust, that feeling is the way their mass is done. It's so controlled, it's so structured. The smells and bells, the incense it's an overpowering smell. Every every one of your senses is activated because you have to be completely silent the whole time, unless you're singing or responding. Everyone speaks in unison, and you're saying ancient words you don't really fully understand, and you're oftentimes, just but of course, so often you're like it's not you're it's like it being a tin of sardines so many times in Catholic Church because they always have two small buildings with people just packed in there, and it's too crowded. And I can already hear people say, "Hey, isn't that an indication that people are attracted to it?" Well, yeah, I've addressed that before. I know what attracts it to people. If you feel like the average church service just isn't stimulating enough for you, you go to a service like this, and it is very often intensely over. You get an intense feeling. It wore off for me because I got so used to it, but especially people who have never been to a Latin mass before, the overpowering incense as well as the chanting and the attitude you have to maintain and the seriousness of it and the standing up and sitting down, and that all is things that train you to be more receptive, that open your mind up, and when you're being told how to act your intense prayer and all that, your mind is going to naturally, whatever feeling you get and the environment that you're around that you associate that feeling with, you're going to assume that the spiritual feeling you're getting in the moment of being in a Latin mass, that is only coming about because of the highly structured way everything's being done. Of course you're going to feel a certain way. Of course you're going to feel something very profound and spiritual because that's how meditation works. That's why people meditate. you know being still, or being in a very controlled environment. If you're trying to feel a certain way, you're trying to get to a certain point, and you're doing these things in order to get there, meaning having this intense spiritual connection. Uh, yeah, you're going to feel that way at the Latin Mass, but you're going to feel that way with a million different other things, and you're going to think, because of the structure of it, that you could only get that from this source, when you as a traditional Catholic, the feeling of certainty or oneness with God or spiritual connection that you have is just as valid for any other Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Muslim, other kind of Christian, whatever. And it's the height of arrogance and to say that, oh no, I know that my feeling of certainty is more legitimate than their feeling of certainty. No, you don't. So obviously, we all know that feelings alone aren't going to cut it. You have to, but when so it has to make logical sense. You have to not only have that emotional anchor, but also a rational anchor. Well, you need both, obviously. You we need to we need to have both in our lives, but it's a balance. And so that comes from that balance in traditional Catholicism, again, comes from the authority of the church, which they really see its authority structure as very totalitarian and very non-democratic and very really anti-human. Because again, this whole structure is anti-human because we're bad, because Garden of Eden. So therefore, the Pope is the be all and end all, and they constantly split hairs about he's only infallible when he says it a certain way, but they also at the same but when you poke down and really drill down deeper into that, they have all these. That's disingenuous too, because you can point to a bunch of other things Pope said that aren't valid either, or aren't binding, either, but they'll say, well, all the church fathers were in agreement that, and that's just as good as as being infallible. They're constantly pulling rabbits out of their hats to try. No, this is another way to redefine that definition or reinterpret it, and they constantly point at the outside world, at Protestants, mostly Protestant churches, and talk about how divided they are, how subdivided they are in their little groups, and they're clearly false because they're not unified. Traditional Catholicism is is absolutely not unified, and no one can pretend it is because they're constantly their heroes are constantly going too far, and then getting kicked to the curb or getting excommunicated or falling out of favor or becoming or being exposed as a hypocrite. And they look at the outside world, and like any cult, they say if they would just do it like us, like all the problems in the world are because every single person on the planet isn't a traditional Catholic and isn't living in the exact same way we are and doing these rituals the exact same way we are. And but they admit, like, unless they go the route of Vigano and become a sedevacantist, and therefore you're not a Catholic. So, you know, that's the thing. The traditional Catholic road, you could say, that you go down, you follow these people who are rewarded and encouraged by their intensity, and so you emulate them, their intensity meaning their militant attitude, and so you get more and more against the Vatican II and against the current Pope, and you get more and more convinced that if the gates of hell can't prevail, then this can't be the real church, and so you become a sedevacantist and you become not a Catholic anymore because the traditional Catholic commentators who are currently, like, you know, trying to again walk this ridiculous tightrope, a tightrope that ultimately is just a contradiction. You can have a tightrope and you can have and at the end of the day, you can just have a contradiction where there's no way to not fall off the edge. And we see constant examples of people falling off the edge all the time. And so what they're saying is, he's the Pope, but he's just really bad, and we can essentially ignore everything he says, and all we can do is wait for a future Pope to undo everything Francis is doing. And that's what all of these people come back to, the people who are trying to stay in. And all of traditional Catholic commentary is just this constant cacophony of, well, what about this statement of the Pope? What about that one? Well, I have my church father quote, and I have mine. Well, let's see how definitive it is, and on and on and on. And I but the rest of the world is doing it wrong. The rest of the world is screwed up, and we're all struggling here. But nobody has all the answers. And any group that aggressively insists that they have all the answers and are perfectly willing to impose uh, their vision of society by any means necessary because of how justified they feel, when when you look inside at when you look at them, and they're just as chaotic and flawed and contradictory as any other human group, you say you're not really proving your case there, are you? Um, you want all of us to live like you. Well, I stopped living like you, and my life has been significantly better. I have found since I stopped becoming a traditional Catholic, I have had a lot more peace of mind than I did. Not, I'm never known truly complete peace, but I've known a lot more of it since I've left. And I've also I'm not thinking about sex as much as I did when I was a traditional Catholic, because they're obsessed with it. Like I've said before, they constantly call the outside world obsessed with sex and everything. But what's obsession? It's thinking about something all the time, and it's not having and it's obsessing with every last detail of it. And traditional Catholics, all they do is get themselves angry at all the sex going on around the world that isn't exactly the way they think it should be done. And again, the whole when you confront them on, how negative and dark and ridden with anger and ridden with fear, this whole world is, they'll say, well, yeah, it's supposed to be that way because penance, because we're supposed to suffer, and then it's like, okay, well, you know, so the problem with the outside world is that we're all not suffering enough. We need to suffer more, and they'll essentially say, yeah, exactly, but it so. And then you confront them on that. It's like, well, what if people want to be happy and not suffer all the time? Well, then you're being immoral. Well, what if your this whole structure doesn't make any sense? It may, and they'll respond to that by pointing to the unbroken line of popes, except for the anti-popes that they admit were there, which is that breaks the line. And so many of them in the traditional Catholic world, you know, the more you take their arguments seriously, and the more you follow their premises and take them to their logical conclusion, the more you become sedevacantist, and the more you are not, the closer you are to simply not being a Catholic and being a completely different religion. I am not the Dragons of Victory. Everything related to my commentary here, none of it is anti-Catholic, really, because again, if you're a mainstream Novus Ordo Catholic out there watching, you do you. Um, I know how deeply uh, personal faith is, and like I said, that feeling you get that you can have in all kinds of church services, but at traditional masses when they set up the environment for you, you get that feeling. You associate, you tie in with it sometimes all the deepest pleasant memories. I'll get to you in a second. Almost done. You tie into it all the most pleasant memories from your own past, and again, you think, I I'm feeling this way because of this church, because of this ritual, because of these smells, bells, whatever. But you come to learn when you step outside that framework of thinking, that exact same um, that exact same kind of uh, way of uh, that feeling, or that sense of connection can be found in so many other places, and you have no way of saying or knowing that you know that the way you felt it was more valid than the way anyone else felt it. So you come at them as saying, well, this is only coming from emotion, and they'll bounce back and say, no, this is rational. The only reason to be Catholic is because it's true, and they'll double down on that, on this can all be understood naturally, and this all makes sense, and there's nothing where you actually have to suspend your critical thinking, or suspend your judgment. And anytime it seems that way, it's only because of a personal fault of yours. It's because you just want to sin, or what have you. And that is always the way abusive relationships work, because abusive relationships operate where people, both sides, there's a reason they're in the relationship. They do get something out of it, but it's ultimately destructive, no matter how beneficial the in the moment benefits are. And in a unhealthy relationship, or one party, or both is not allowing the other person to exercise all of their faculties as freely as they should be allowed to, because if they were to, that might potentially end the relationship. And so um, it, this whole ultimately you're plunged into a world of, and if you don't believe me, just go browse traditional commentary right now as they try to, figure out how to respond to what's happened with Vigano. You'll find countless videos of how great he was, and now they kind of have to say, okay, well, he's still great, but he went a little too far. But just remember that their entire, they'll repeat the extra ecclesiam nulla salus line at you all the time. You have to be Catholic. You have to remain in their church. But if you follow their trajectory, if you follow the path of their heroes, you ultimately join a different church. Um, and they admit that there's no solution to their problem, because if the only thing they can do is wait for Pope Francis to die, and you can see how truly macabre and disgusting they can get at borderline wishing for his death. They'll say, well, a future pope will have to fix this. Okay, well that's and it all goes back to this very, very, loose kind of trust in God will fix this. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you just wait for him to fix it then? And if you don't have anything productive to say, don't say it. Because all their commentary is, at the end of the day, unless they go set up a contest, is there's nothing that can be done because there is no mechanism within the church to address the issue that they see that there is. It's an insoluble, there is the only way for traditional Catholics to solve their problem is to stop being Catholic. Um, because the current church is showing no signs whatsoever of going, like, whoever's the next pope is not going to, I mean, who knows? I'm not going to, put on, say, I know the future, whatever happens, happens, but there's just no indications that any of the people who are likely to be the next pope will do anything remotely what the traditionalists want. And whatever small things they do, it'll never be enough because it's again, you'll find that they're never satisfied with any uh, it, it's all a black hole of suffering, and so they're never satisfied with any action of goodwill because it's never enough for them. They'll just demand more, and it's like it's because again, there's no resolution to their issue because the change at Vatican II is just the church now. Like it's just too profound a transformation that happened for the better. It's just not practically possible what they want to happen, and so they'll keep doubling down on prayer. They say we just have to pray more and more and more. And for me personally, I when the only thing that made my life better or that improved certain things in my life was when I took direct action instead of just praying and waiting for God to do something. Um, it just showed me more and more how much the world doesn't work the way they think it does. And I just have, you know, I I don't have any faith anymore because I just realized that I couldn't think back to any time I felt some God's presence or a connection to something greater and didn't think I couldn't have got that. The reason I couldn't felt that way is because I was being trained to or told I had to feel that way, and the structure of the mass put those feelings into me. And so when I thought, well, have I ever felt that way just normally, naturally, I couldn't think of a single time. And so that meant lost me my emotional connection to being Catholic. And then when I tried to look at it this way, or tried to look at it, just completely rationally, logically, without any emotion whatsoever, um, you get to points where that's not possible. You get to points so often where the only response to a question, a contradiction, something that doesn't make sense, the only response is to make you feel bad for drawing that conclusion and to make you uh, feel like you have to suffer for it. And so you get to the point where you naturally avoid even going there in your mind because you anticipate the 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 the, the overwhelming unnecessary amount of guilt you'll feel. So all that being said, traditional Catholicism is dangerous, destructive. It makes no sense, and it's a circular trap. It's a logical contradiction, and it, um, it's not going to give you peace. It will for a short for a moment, perhaps in the throes of the traditional Latin Mass, but you can't you know you can't create that every moment for yourself when you leave that building because there's just again there's nothing practical and by their own admittance that they can do. And so the only end to any of their commentary, tradcath commentary, the only end point of it is just to make you more and more angry and sad and disillusioned with the current Vatican II church to know and when your only end perhaps in their world is to pray it out and to just meditate more, and you will feel good then, but then you're going to separate from that, and the everything the issue is going to be still there. And yeah, anyone commenting, I will engage with you if you know what you're talking about. Obviously, disagree with me, please disagree with me, but because I made a mistake in the last couple of videos. I'm human. I don't claim at all to have to come at this with any kind of authority, but trad cats do, and the authority falls apart like a house of cards with the slightest poke, because they ultimately reject the authority of the current church, and so their only real source of human authority in their minds is their local trad cath priest or whatever. And you know that can only last, that situation they're in can only last so long. And narcissists and destructive people who operate destructively create chaos and demand peace in return. And until traditional Catholicism stops creating chaos um, for themselves and for the rest of us, then I'm going to keep addressing this, and um, I'm going to stay engaged in this. I needed the break, but yeah. So for all the fans of uh of Vigano out there, defenders of him, I'm more Catholic than you are.